G'day and welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined by Algared. I was just saying that before the show. I've got the pointing going the right way now, so I'm now having brain farts because I'm so used to doing it backwards.
He was literally saying, "I've got it. It works. I can point in the right way, and it works." And
but yeah, and then I stuffed myself because I'm so mentally used to pointing opposite of where Algared is, not to where Algared actually is. So yeah, I'll have to get used to that. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about some of the most rejected ships in the game. So ships that are not usually picked by people, and we're going to go through them and yeah, talk about them, and then we might have a follow-up over about and it was Algared's idea. I was about to do it again. Algared's idea and the most overrated ship. So we might do that a little way down the track. So yeah, but
and certainly for these underrated ships, it really does. When we were looking at it, it really did come down to gameplay loops, didn't it? It was really that kind of, they were tied into that, and yet even some of those, of the ships in those gameplay loops have been totally written off at the moment because they can't do X, Y, or Z. So,
and because of that, that allows us to talk about some ships that don't exist. We're going to do it more like that. So we're not going to do just ships. We're also going to do roles. So we've kind of picked 5 roles that we think are a bit underrated, and we'll kick it off of that with medical, Algared. So I'll let you take it away. You take your pick. There's obviously going to be 4 ships in there, so you take your pick on where you want to start and go from there. I know you want to talk about the Cutlass Red at one point, so go nuts.
Yeah, well, in terms of medical gameplay, we've certainly got the Endeavour Hospital, which has got everything. We've got currently the Carrack, the 890 jump with a med bed that can respawn, and then we've got the Cutlass Red, which is just a lowest tier bed, and all it can do is fix you up. It doesn't act as a spawn point anymore, and so because of that, it has been written off by so many people in terms of not being worthwhile, and yet that makes it totally underrated. It's still, as much as I hate saying about the Cutlass, it is still a good ship.
Almost comes back to that now and then thing, doesn't it? Because like now it's not so great, but when like more medical stuff rolls out, it's clearly going to be a lot better than nothing, so to speak.
But even at the moment, even though it can't be used as a spawn point, it still can heal those broken bones or heal those wounds. And so if you're not dead, if you can get to that bed, it'll actually fix you up. Which is something the jabbing yourself with a medical pen isn't necessarily going to do. And currently in game, one of the things it does do, and this is probably something that will disappear, is you get into the bed, it actually resets your food and hydration currently. So that's, but people still wipe it off as not being useful or valuable because it can't respawn or can't act as a respawn point. So that certainly is a medical ship that is certainly underrated.
I don't disagree on that at all. I think like hand tools are clearly like tier, like like the tier under the tier 3 bed. They're like a tier 4 bed type of thing. So having a bed, even if it's the one up, you're literally gonna be able to travel to a tier 2 system or a tier 1 bed or to an actual medical facility. It'll just extend that and give you way more than just the hand tools 10.
And that's assuming that you need that further advance. But that tier 1 will fix broken bones. It will fix bleeds. It will fix those other things. So to people underwrite it because it can't respawn me. It can't keep me in the game and save me that flight. But if you don't die, you don't need the respawn. And so that red could be actually very valuable to you or your group.
So
in the long run,
the next ship up would obviously be the Apollo. So for me, the Apollo leaps and bounds. Tier 3 beds don't appear in anything besides it and the Endeavour at the moment, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that's you can clearly see like saving lives is going to be a big thing. Every battle is going to want people that can respawn just so they've got more people to play with. I don't quite understand why it's so underrated, but they are. Like, people just are not buying these ships. You can go look at the data. You can go look at any fleet, org fleet, and you can clearly see the ships that are missing. And they are these ones that we're talking about today. So, yeah.
And I think part of it comes from, I know with the medical ships, part of it comes from our mantra of, go big and earn down. But the Apollo really is a ship. If you're doing the medical gameplay, you don't need to go hospital because the Apollo actually can do what the hospital does. It just doesn't do it in mass. But it can do the tier 1 spawn bird or the tier, the top tier spawn bird as well as a tier 2 or the tier 1. So
let's go a little bit into speculation now. What do you think the ship between the Apollo and the Endeavour would be? Is it just a smaller hospital? Is that all it is? Is it just so where the hospital is like what 20, 30 beds and the Apollo is like maximum of 6, so this thing's like 15?
Yeah, it's a hard one because the Apollo is still a medium ship, so you don't have that large ship, and yet it's basically billed as a mobile clinic, and so the next level up from the next level down from a hospital would be a clinic, and yet that's almost what the Apollo is billed as. So it's somewhere in between, and I'm not sure where to go with that.
Next question I have for you: what manufacturer do you think it would be?
Let's see. Apollo is RSI. Got Endeavour is MISC.
And Drake is Colors. Colors, right. I'm thinking maybe something like Argo, but Argo don't have anything currently medical. I'd love to see an Origin, but Origin don't seem to want to do anything that's useful. So
I wouldn't see it as being Drake. I wouldn't see it as being because of I see them as being more salvage orientated. I wouldn't see it as being Argo because they're more utilitarian. I wouldn't see it as Consolidated Outland because they're kind of out there. But I think Crusader would be a good fit, I think.
Yeah, I could see that actually. And that kind of size of their ships would work as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of speculation. We'll move on, but you can kind of see again with that gameplay of medical, it just not being, they're a little bit rejected. So the Endeavour, obviously, we talk about the Endeavour a lot here on this show. I can just so see one of these rocking up just outside a massive fleet, and it's just constantly respawning people, or people are coming back and being repaired and stuff like that. I like any massive org battle. One of these are going to be there. Would you kind of agree with that, or?
Yeah, and I think any of those, certainly any in-game events, the raid on Vega, if that had happened while the game was live and the Endeavour had been around, there'd have been missions for the Endeavour to go to Vega to deal with the casualties that were coming out of that. So any major casualties, any major tragedies or events that had gone on, that will be true for any of the medical ships. But then, sure, you got those big ships, but those little ships, like you said, the Apollo, medium ship, and the Cutlass, a small ship, and yet when you look at what they offer in medical gameplay, they're huge, and yet because they're smaller, they often get rejected or ignored, and certainly the Cutlass at the moment is ignored because it can't act as a respawn point. And so people have written it off as not being good as a medical ship.
There's still something interesting about those smaller ships having like that more one-on-one medical care. I would have I honestly really wish the Apollo was an Origin ship, because I actually think it would have been really good to have like a private doctor's surgery, and that kind of is what that is, where the next step up would have been better as something like RSI that's more generalized, it's kind of like a health clinic, like as you said. I can definitely see that being a thing. All right, let's go ahead.
Before you do move on, one of the things I always just to look at an option for the 890 jump as a private hospital. Because one of the things I've always felt about Origin ships is they're clinical. They're too sterile. The 890 does get that luxury aspect a little bit well, but a lot of the others just feel too clinical and sterile. And I always thought, an 890 jump could work as a high-end private hospital. So.
St. Algared's Medical Center. I can say now. All right, we'll move on to repair ships.
Old Man Hurston. Yeah. St. Algerd. Man of many personas.
Yeah. All right, so we'll kick it off with the Vulcan. Now, I for a long time really dismissed this ship as kind of fluff, but the military people have really convinced me it has a lot of weight especially with on-planet and vehicle repairs, like sending in a drone to repair a tank or repair it, get a tank out of damage, harm's way, that invaluable. It doesn't have to be just a tank either. Also, refueling something in atmosphere, because at the moment you can't actually refuel in atmosphere. But if you can land a drone on a ship, that means you can probably. It even separates it a little bit from the Star-R as well in that regard. I don't know. I'm talking about refueling. We're meant to be talking about repair, but you get what I'm trying to talk about. I'm trying to kind of fluff up the Vulcan there.
But the Vulcan does do all three, doesn't it? It does do the repair. It does do the rearm. It does do the refuel, and so. But
it's not the only one. I'd like to point out the Crucible does that as well. So it is a part of their kind of thing. They are multi-use, these repair, kind of refuel. And I think they're kind of a bit support as well, because they're going to have, restocking of ammo and a few other things. So, yeah. But, go ahead.
And we always sing the praises of Crucible. And yet, if you think about it logically, if you've got a Crucible, would you want to take that, even though it can, Scarab, it can land on the planets and it could do vehicle repair and everything else? If you're looking at forward repair, would you want to take in your main workshop to pull a tank or a vehicle out of harm's way? You'd send your small thing in, or you'd send your crane in and haul it back.
So your Crucible would be sitting back on the back line, almost where the medical tents would have been in World War II. Like, things would be coming back to it. The Crucible's probably almost like the recovery vehicle. Like, it'll try and get them back on their feet and get out. I actually think I know this is a tangent, but I actually think they'll use SRVs to just pluck tanks straight out and pull them right back. But that's just me.
I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a recovery vehicle to land as well. But that's go on.
So for you, because we've got the Crucible there and the Vulcan, what's the middle one? For me, we've talked about this a few times. I think it's some kind of ground garage type of thing that can drive vehicles up into, and it's more specially tailored towards vehicles, because that Scarab already is kind of fixing smaller ships, and we've already got the Vulcan that can repair them and stuff like that, but there's nothing really dedicated towards vehicles. So I'm thinking like something that lands and you can literally just drive up into it and repair, which would make it bigger than the Vulcan, obviously. So
I've got a thought for you,
which
is something I don't think we've talked about in the past. The Liberator. The Liberator is actually the one in between the Crucible and the...
Except it's bigger than the Crucible, but yeah, I get your point though. Yeah, it does have the repair facilities on board.
Because it's got the ability to take multiple tanks.
But it's not really dedicated repair.
It's not really dedicated repair, but you would be able to do repair, or at least hand repair in the stores you've got on the ship to do so.
But by your very definition, so is the Carrack, the stuff, the Carrack, the
any
Idris, the Kraken. Yeah, so dedicated.
But the fact that the Liberator can take large land vehicles, whereas the Carrack and the 890 and the other ships that can land, the only one that I think could take those larger land vehicles at the moment that we've seen would be the Idris.
Yep. So I'm going to steer back on point.
Yep.
Middle ship between the Vulcan and the Crucible. Yeah. What do you think it would be?
I think it'd be some type of recovery vehicle.
Okay.
So some crane, some hoisting vehicle that had limited repair.
So some kind of tractor beam for picking stuff up and dragging it back, and then repairing. Okay. All right. And obviously we've got the Crucible. Something that we recommend all the time, and this is one of the reasons we recommend, like, repair is, rejected and underrated, is just like there are just not enough repair vehicles in fleets. There's actually more medical ships than there are repair in the fleets that I've seen.
And that's coming on as just having said that the medical is often ignored.
But it is, so there is a tier list to it, almost like where they're just not.
I think a lot of people often ignore those support role ships, or they have them as an afterthought because they want to do the action, and it's we've got other people in the org who will take care of that. But there are very few orgs that seem to have it organised. And
Let me just ask you this quickly. Do you think you're going to need repair more than you need medical? Because I kind of lean towards repair more than medical. Because you're going to be in the ship or in a Titan suit or in something to protect yourself. So I think you'd need something to repair more than you would medical. But maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm going to say you'd probably want the medical.
Okay.
And mainly because the medical that can either A, a ship that can actually heal you if you're damaged and just get you up and running, or B, a ship that can actually act as a respawn point so that you don't have to spend 10 minutes flying back. I think of the way, the training that goes into modern armies in terms of the troops. You try and keep your troops alive because you can replace the equipment, but you can't replace the trained pilot or the trained engineer or the trained, that training takes time and is longer to replace than, say, the vehicle. So,
and that Crucible itself, it can literally repair every thing in the game currently right now. So you can park a vehicle in the Scarab, you can do the smaller ship, you can remove that ship out, put in something like a Retaliator that has the arms go around it, and it goes right up to an Idris where it flips that whole cab around and can do the whole gamut.
And just starts acting like a crab, just working on it. So, yeah.
So I think to me it seems more clearly that they're going to have that, like, that's the space-based one. The Vulcan kind of goes down to the planet more, and I've got a feeling whatever the middle one is, it'll probably go somewhere between the two. It'll be a bit more scalable. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on, next type of ships off our rank are scanning ships. It's kind of interesting because just recently in the game, they've turned down the distance that mining ships can scan at. And we know scanning's coming later this year, so I think it might be a preemption to that. And I think if they're lowering the range, it's probably showing that if you take something like a Terrapin with you, they can find the stuff for you. They have a bit of a role there to do.
I'm going to say that it heralds the day of the Inforunner, just because we're on Inforunners, so I've got to do that plug.
But you know what I mean. Like it also means the Terrapin could go through the asteroid field and find all the rocks in advance and sell that data to a ship that basically roughly knows where it is. So it's not really looking itself; it's just going where it's been told. And I think that's a part of what we're used to, these scanners that could go so far, and that's now going to become back into the domain of like really big ships that can scan really fast. So I think the Terrapin is it's a little bit overpriced for what it is. Let's be honest, it's one of the most expensive profession starters, but it was also sold on the rule of cool because it's easily the best looking of all those profession starters.
And it does have that advantage where it can close itself up, and then because it's closed itself up and it's containing the heat inside, it suddenly becomes unseeable, or it's not giving off a heat signature. But the second you open it up, it's like, hey, I'm here. But it does have that utility mount for two size 2 scanners, I believe.
And that makes it unique.
Huge.
And the other ships,
the only other ship that I know of it, there are only 2 other ships I think that have got the utility mount for scanners. One is the Aquila with the top turret with 2 size 2 scanners, and the third one is with the utility mount is the MSR with I'm not sure what size that scanner is, but they're the only ships that I'm aware of with those scanners.
But they're not to the same size of the Terrapin as well. And even if you look across the other kind of scanning ships, you got things like the Aquila. I think the Aquila, as you said, is the only other one I can think of. But when you go up to larger things like the Carrack, it's only got one. So that also gives it the ability. So like going back to what we're talking about mining, you could literally have a mining scanner and a salvage scanner, and it can find both things at the same time. And that's just an example. Like I've made those up, obviously, but there might be a life form scanner because we don't really know exactly what they are yet. But just the ability to have 2, you can find 2 different sets of things, which is a lot more than most.
And that's the thing with those ships with those scanning mounts is they are above and beyond the ship's normal scanners. And so, the Terrapin at the moment, you can go out and you can scan with it, but you've still got those 2 extra scanners that could be doing more. With the Aquila, you've got the ship's normal scanners, but you've got those 2 extra scanners that could be doing more. Same with the MSR. And so, and I know the MSR is still a bit of flavour of the month, and yet in terms of its role of being a scanning ship, I think it's underrated. The Terrapin is certainly underrated.
As you said, it's heralding something's coming, and I think scanning when it comes in is drastically going to change the game, because we've been taking finding stuff for granted, and I think it's about to change in a really big way. And what's coming in initially is just scanning, but then when you've got all the different scanning types that'll come after that, like as it expands, completely different again.
And tying in with that, you've got to say the Herald is an underrated or often rejected ship.
You have tangented off our list, sir. I demand you retract your statement. No, it's fine.
But it is a ship that is often unwanted because A, it's Drake, B, it doesn't really have much value in terms of purpose what it can do now, and yet it's very fast. It can scan, it can do other things as well, and yet that gameplay loop when it comes in is going to make that ship very valuable.
I still think there's a bigger ship there too. I think something, Constellation MSR, that's more towards the data train. Like I could fully see a ship that's just like 3 scanners, and it's got like one scanner, like one pilot and one scanner, and that's it. And it's just a whole bunch of different scanning types, so it can scan the whole spectrum. It's just sitting there trying to find.
And you look at the top end, where if you've got the Endeavour with its, I think it's the Endeavour Discovery with its computer, just for tracking down and analysing the data that comes in.
Well, it's technically, I never thought of that. It is technically scanning as well. True, you are right.
And then there is and it does have the telescope as well, which is also scanning. So, but that's at the top end. But even in that, once it's cracked down all that information, it's also going to be that role for those ships to take it to where it needs to go. And that's where ships like the Herald with its speed will actually, I think, come into their own as well.
It definitely falls under the exploring tag, but it's not the sexy exploring that people talk about. Like, it's not the Star Trek one. It's the same with the Odyssey. The Odyssey kind of falls a little bit under that as well, where it's more you're trying to find valuable stuff with the Odyssey. So scanning is general, like as you put it across all the ships, it's going to be the money maker, because it's not the glorious one. Like, everyone's going to want to go out and like that. Always go back to that poll Algared, where 78% of people want to do exploring. That you can tell it's the Carrack one that they want to do, though. They don't want to do the one, oh, I found a rock. Like, they want to find, oh, I found some aliens, or I found a secret civilization, or a wormhole. They want all the cool names and the cool credits.
I don't want to do the sitting there scanning space for hours on end looking for the anomalies that are there, which is what I think you'll do certainly with the Endeavour.
You can see the progression though already. So the starter ships are basically like around the planet you live, and then you get a bit bigger ship and you're around that solar system, and then you go a bit bigger and you're going, a few jumps around, and then when you get to capital ships, that's when you're starting across the universe. So a Terrapin is more likely, like later on you can use it in organ stuff, but if you're soloing it, you're really just going to be going around finding things to sell information to people. And you can see how much data running or information brokerage and exploring are linked. They really are. Like the MSR and the Herald, they're going to work a lot with things like the Terrapin and the Carrack, because they're going to be the brokerages for that.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And you look at and to go into your thing about the bigger ships, like the way in which the Endeavour seems to work at the moment, certainly with its telescope, it will scan off and it'll search far, and it'll find that point of interest in the neighbouring system or X, Y, Z, and then it'll send
the Carrack, and then after the Carrack, the Odyssey, and then after the Odyssey, the Terrapin. Yeah, exactly. No, 100% agree with everything you just said. It's almost it's finding the stuff really far away that we just don't know is there, and it's like, oh, I just found something interesting, and then the Carrack will go. Yeah, no, that's 100% how it's going to work. The Carrack is the ships that's going to mean finding the wormholes, the aliens, and all the cool stuff, right? It's not going to. You can do it in a Terrapin, but I think your odds are going to be a lot lower, because you just can't.
In any ship.
Yeah, yeah. It's just increased, isn't it, when you do it that way? Yeah. All right. Moving on to building ships, of which at the moment we only have one, which is the Pioneer. Algared, I'll let you take the cake on this one from the start, or tell me about the Pioneer.
Well, Pioneer is a massive big ship. It builds outposts. It 3D prints them basically. So how that works, we have no idea really. We know it goes down. It kind of prints them. whether you can actually purchase different outpost patterns, which would be cool to have.
I think a lot of those for the Pioneer, now this is just me speculating, but I think a lot of them will come through the reputation system. I think if you get rep with people, they will give, you'll be able to buy patterns off them to build things and stuff like that. And we now know that the Pioneer, as Algared said, can 3D print, but it also is more like a factory now. So you can actually print stuff out. But that kind of alludes to the fact that they're going to be ships that can pick that stuff up and move it elsewhere. Now, whether that's a dedicated ship or a cargo ship, I don't know. And does that also mean that we may have smaller ones?
And when they certainly brought out the Pioneer, the idea was that it's not the only ship that builds bases. It's not the only way to build bases, because Silas Corona was saying, it usually costs a lot of money. It's carding materials, etc. This is a ship that goes there and builds it in one hit and prints it in one hit. But that raises the idea of the flat packs and bases that need to be assembled on site. So you'd go and... So there are other ways of building bases or outposts, and I'd like to think what we see in Stanton, the square ones, is kind of a prefabs, whereas the other places are more the 3D printed.
It makes me wonder: can you technically build a building with just a hand tool? If you have the materials, can you sit there and hand draw in? Because to give an example, we know. We know how the repair system works, right?
Yeah.
And you can fill and draw stuff in. So why isn't repair the same kind of thing? It's construction essentially. So why can't they take that same system, where it 3D prints a frame in the Crucible and then you paint over the top of it? It's the same thing. Why can't it do the frame and then you paint over the walls? I could see that being a thing. So you could literally have a starter ship that's akin to, that little garage I talked about for the Crucible. Why can't you have like a little truck or something that you turn up and it's got like a 3D printer and the arm goes out and it 3D prints the wall and you tractor beam pick up the wall.
We'll call that truck Bob.
Pick up Bob the Builder. I see what you did there. Tractor beam the wall up and put it in position. Like I can see all that. And yes, it would take time, but you could still do it, right? And you'd only have one or two people doing it. You don't need an entire map. Like sending a Pioneer to build one little outpost is not very efficient. So I do think there is room there for other ships. And
I could see the Pioneer being used to build, you've got your major mining center that you found the top ore, you go there, you're setting down your mining, you're building your whole mining outpost. So you're building your drills and your everything else.
And by the opposite token of that, if you are just a solo guy and you happen to find a really good mining vein, set up your little base and it's mining and maybe a couple of air defense turrets, I can see that as well. The scale of the people you're working with. So I think there is definitely room there for at least one smaller ship, if not two.
But in terms of why they are, at the moment, why it's underrated or unwanted is just the price of the Pioneer is just over the top, and it's also hull limited, so it's very hard to get hold of.
Yep.
But that also means when it does come available, people do clamour for it. But in terms of the smaller building ships or that gameplay, it's just not there at the moment, and so it's often written off as something. Oh, we'll deal with that later, but it's something I think we will want to be looking at down the track. And you think of a Carrack, and it's cargo pods, and one of the cargo pods that you could have got for the Carrack was a science lab. And people have often speculated the idea of going somewhere, dropping off that cargo pod, and kind of setting up a temporary base.
You just gave me an idea. What if it's not a small ship that builds it? What if it's an actual vehicle that's just got like a 3D printing arm in the back of it? Because then you can chuck it on a Carrack. And if you're in an emergency, you can build an emergency shelter.
Yeah,
you can build a little... yeah, wow. Okay, that changes it even more. Because then you can just put it in ships and take it places.
And rather than a flat pack, what about an SRV that's hauling prefabricated square blocks of units and taking them and placing them on
you could call it the foundation, and all it does is build the foundations, and the SRV brings it in and drops the block on the foundation.
Yeah.
So all this is a ship that builds foundations. But
you hand build your foundations and then drop the thing on top. So there are options for that, and we are going to need those outposts. We are going to need places where you can have an emergency shelter, or you can have a place where you can recharge ships or other, or stay for a longer period of time if you need.
Even
to
just
do
building a
repairs.
landing pad so ships can land and repair and refuel is going to be massive. Like if you can build that and you can repair, like so something like a carrack. If you could build your own landing pad that could repair your own carrack while you're there, that is huge, absolutely massive. Even if it takes you a day to build it because it'll take you too long to go back and come back. I can see the advantage of a vehicle that could build things even if it's slow. I don't know. Can you see that, Algared, or not?
Well, I think the Carrack's a bad choice because I've always understood the drones on the Carrack are more repair drones.
Yeah, but yeah, that is a bad choice. But you understand what I'm trying to say. If you can build a landing pad that'll allow you to repair ships that land on it, and it's miles from anywhere, just the ability to build some serviceable things because of that 3D printer type of analogy. I think I'm saying you can print out a 3D level 3, level tier 1 medical bed, but if you can actually print out some really cool stuff, it could change the game completely.
Well, you probably could print out the tier 1 medical bed, or the tier 3 medical bed, or whichever way it goes. But it wouldn't be useful to you unless you had that sphere that kind of keeps the data available for you. And
Again,
that's the key, which wouldn't.
Again, you'd also have to have the patents to be able to print them.
Yeah,
through
and
the
you'd also
reputation.
need to have, even if looking at the repair place, you'd need to have the resources available to do the actual repair afterwards. So, yes, you could have a landing pad that could repair, refuel, and rearm, but if you don't have any fuel, darts, or ammo there, you can't do anything. It's just, I can land, but which add more ships to others bringing that stock in.
I'm going to move on to the last set of ships we've got here. Now, we've talked about this one before when we've talked about potential capital ships we'd like to see, but it's e-warfare. Because currently, I'm going to go through it, but I'm going to butcher this because it's been a while since I've thought about this. We've got the Sentinel, and I know we've got EMP missiles on the Banner Defender. Yep. Is there anything else? I know I'm missing one, and I'm having a brain fart moment.
There is the Razor.
There we go. Yeah.
There's also, that's the only ones I can think of. And I don't know whether the Herald was kind of billed as at one point having some warfare type aspects to it.
But the point we're getting at is they're generally smaller. We don't have anything that's Constellation size, so no medium, no large, and nothing capital. And I actually think there really is room there for something a lot more, let's say, disruptive. And I'd like to see something like that. And again, and that's why it's made this list. It's underrated. We just don't see it. The closest, as I said, when the Banner Defender's got some EMP missiles, and there's only one real ship, like E-Warfare at the moment, Sentinel. That's it. It's the only one.
Yep. And because it's because it is the Vanguards. That is right, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And the Vanguard are much maligned ship because they're clunky and people don't like the guns and the people don't like X, Y, and Z. And yet, e-warfare, when it comes in, is going to be a major asset. I know they did talk about the I think that when they talked about the Sentinel, they talked about torpedoes that workers, hacking torpedoes. You'd fire them and they kind of override systems and do other things.
They talked about like landing on the outside of the ship and kind of almost like deploying an antenna, and that hacks into the ship, and then you communicate with the antenna to hack the other ship, essentially. So yeah, very, very, very different.
And so that's again a ship that I think is underrated in terms of whether it'll be needed or otherwise. So I can't think of a value of having a massive ship unless you're doing I can't think of one. The only kind of thing I could think of is like the interdiction ship, a big, the interdiction Star Destroyer.
Well, I can see a ship that's kind of it's not just e-warfare, but like it's a scanner ship, it's a bounty hunting ship, it takes people out with warfare so it can capture them and stuff like that. So it as you kind of go up in that e-warfare tree, it's almost amalgamation of other professions as well, where with the Sentinel, it's still
the mobile cop shop.
Yeah, kind of. So you'd have someone on there that's like a really good hacker. You'd have someone on there that's scanning. Some people that are doing a lot of data transfer. You could scan other ships. You could actually reverse it and go the other way too. You could use that criminally as well. So you could actually have a ship that, there's a guy over there. Let's go take him out and take all his shit. Like, I could see that as a ship that's... So basically, rather than directly attacking people, you are information gathering, and then at the right appropriate time, crippling them with a hack or something like that. So it's more like a stealth ship. Kind of think like a Mercury Star Runner crossed with a Retaliator, but it doesn't use the torpedoes. It's like e-warfare. There's room for a ship like that. Again, if you go bigger, imagine a ship like that takes out a Kraken or an Idris. Just temporarily disables them for 2 minutes so everyone can get on board. I can see that. I can really see that. Like, it would change everything, because you would have to have people that would anti-hackers that cover you and stuff like that.
I could see a ship like that being a Tavaran ship, just because of the way the Tavaran used to fight. They'd drop off their elite saboteurs. They get on the ship and they'd start screwing with your systems.
The last time we talked about this, remember how I said it was like a giant stingray, like a manta ray? But I can see that as the kind of Tavaran bird thing too. I can see that. Yeah. I don't know what you'd call it. Yeah.
A bird of prey?
Well, yeah, you literally could just call it the bird of prey, couldn't you? Yeah. I was going to go with bald eagle, but I just don't like the look of that visually in my head. And the American bald eagle is like this to the Australian eagles. The Australian eagles are just eat it for breakfast, but yeah.
Well, the difference is, isn't the bald eagle more a scavenger rather than a...
Sounds about right to me. Anyway, before we get in trouble with our American viewers, I think we should stop. But yeah, go look it up if you don't believe us. But anyway, that's kind of been everything for this show. Unless there's anything you would like to add, Algared, is there any other ships that you would want to add to those 5 groups? Or?
I don't think so at the moment. And besides, if we do talk about other ships, it stops us coming back later on if we do think of them.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Yeah, thinking of future shows down the track.
So maybe let us know in the comments ships that you think that are a bit rejected and underrated and that might need a bit more love. But I think that's kind of the good thing about this game too. You can find your niche. Like right now, there's a lot of PvP combat things going on. People do get very caught up in the now. But as things more roll out, I think you're going to find the combat's going to be nowhere near as popular as it is right now. I think it's going to fall into a subset just like everything else, because combat does have its place. Don't get me wrong. But that's all we really have right now until, we've got mining, obviously. But, we've got salvage coming, scanning coming. Once that scanning hits, though, that's such a big thing, because with the cargo factor and the scanning, that's the first core gameplay loop, because you can now have people doing stuff, and the bad guys can find them, turn up, create problems, and then the good guys turn up to fix them. So you've got that whole loop, and that adds escorting and all that stuff.
And as scanning comes on, it means you're not just going to be... Hopefully, it means you're not just going to be able to scan and go, oh, yeah, that's players on that ship, and yes, it's got this, this, and this. Yeah. It's going to be a matter of the closer you get, the better your scans are going to be, unless you've got a really good scanning ship. And the better your scanning ship is, the further you'll be able to detail, get that information.
It's like you said with the Terrapin 2, being able to take 2 different ones. Most people are going to take a generalized scanner, because that's the best thing to take when you've only got 1. But then when you've got 2, can you have a generalized and a specialized? So, I just think the Terrapin is going to be until scanning is in. I just don't think people are going to see it for what it is.
I would have to guess that for most ships, you're not going to be able to change out that scanner. That's going to be the default scanner your ship has.
Maybe.
You might be able to change the grade of the scanner it's in, but I don't think you're going to be able to change that general type of scanner. Whereas the others will have that. Those mounts will give you that option to add or change.
In typical Inforunners style, we are tangenting like crazy. So yeah, let us know in your thoughts below. Some ships that you think are underrated. We did go into a little bit of speculation here, because there's obviously some ships that are missing, but that's also why we think they're underrated, because they just don't have the ships to fill out their line.
Or the gameplay.
like this video. It really helps us out a lot. Make sure you're subscribed, tick that notification bell, because we've been hearing reports from people that they're not getting our videos anymore. Don't know how true that is, but I've had 3 in the last weeks, and I've had ones going back a few weeks as well. Is there anything else you want to add, Algared, if I forgot anything?
Leave your comments. Be respectful and polite. We do read every single comment. And we do try to respond to most. If we don't respond, it's not that we haven't read it. It's just that it's either, can't really add to it.
Sometimes we just disagree and we don't want to fight with you.
and sometimes we agree. And apart from just saying thank you for watching and your comments, which kind of gets a bit
superfluous
boring
after a while.
The 50th time.
Yeah,
we just say
Well, I like a lot of things that I just agree with, but I don't want to reply.
Give a smiley or whatever, but so like, subscribe, hit that bell. Analytics, love those types of things. It does help us out. And so many of our viewers who are return viewers still haven't hit that bell. So
one thing I want to add.
Anyway.
One thing I want to add too is our streams have been going really well. We've been streaming on Australian Friday or American Thursday just as ISC drops. Well, obviously there's been no ISC the last couple of weeks, but the views are still going up. So people obviously like hanging out and stuff. So I'm trying to remember the time. I think it's around, I'd have to look it up, but yeah.
Usually around...
I'll leave it in the
7 a.m. our time.
Yeah, it's 7 hour our time, but I'll leave a description in the description below for the Northern Hemisphere. I'll put it in UTC so people can see. All right. Well, anyway, with that, I've got to point the right way now. He's been Algared. I've been Execute.
He's been Execute.
We'll catch you in the next one.
I've been Algared, and we're out of here. Take care.